do they not get depressed?
That is a good question and a complex question. Across Europe, across the US, all the prevalent studies are finding at about 30% of adult pythons. How I have shifted managing is the gross disease. I can walk into any population of pythons in the US, no matter how healthy. If you have not done what I've done for that first building, I can almost guarantee you I can guess the prevalence of your virus. Biosecure building. So this is what I call the biosecure building. And so in total I have about half the world's python species here. Most of the ones in this building are the ones that I deem sensitive. So the ones that are not been bred at scale commercially, they're ones from sensitive populations. Everything in here was either born into this building, like hatched into it, or went through a year-long quarantine with 3 different tests for serpentovirus, which is the respiratory virus that I work with. It's kind of closely related to coronaviruses. I have the whole building under a positive air pressure, and then I also have an air scrubber in here, so everything is like HEPA filtered, UV filtered. The sanitizer I use is a quaternary ammonium, but the thing that a lot of people don't take into consideration is contact time for sanitizer. And so I have this timing system set up to have a buzzer at the end of the contact time. It's always amazing to me how much longer waiting here a full minute actually takes. Like, I have this group living in this $80 Amazon marijuana grow tent. And so this species of python has been bred in captivity fewer times than any other python species. This species has been bred twice in Europe and about 10 times here in the US. I am extremely excited in that one of my 4 is pregnant right now and I'm waiting on a clutch of eggs. So breeding this species is really kind of a pretty significant deal, and I'm just blown away that I was able to do it in like an $80 grow tent. Like, it's really considered quite an achievement to keep this species alive, let alone to be comfortable enough to breed on the opposite side of the world, and that's kind of what I specialize in doing here. These are Borneo short-tailed pythons, and they're known for having a little bit of an attitude, especially when they're babies.
He's like, oh, be careful. I won't be surprised if we see a bite today.
You will see a bite today. So I'm not like 100% sure about it, but I feel like there's some pythons that have a very pinpointed heat detection and others that have a more general one. And these guys feel like they have a very specific one. So if I'm dancing around her, she's kind of not seeing me. This species is extremely difficult to breed and is extremely cannibalistic. They're a very intelligent python. They're very slow in thinking, and like you'll see they do these strikes, but it's very rare to actually get bit by them. Like, they're just very slow. They clearly try and figure you out as a keeper in a way that almost no other python does. Oh my god! So this is a Sumatran short-tailed python. Also sometimes called a black blood python. You can see where they get the name short-tailed python, because they are just a stubby little tail and just a big chunky body. Like, so there's some snakes I describe as sticky, and this is a sticky snake. And you'll see when I pull out a Burmese python, they are not sticky. This animal, if it really wanted to not let go of me, would take at least 2 people to like actually get it off me. The way he's holding on to me is very different. This is the Burmese python, yep. So the Burms I have are from South Florida, or bred from animals I got from South Florida. So this is actually an F1 that I produced from parents from South Florida.
Yeah,
they're
doesn't wrap.
They're a big snake, but they are, personality-wise, like, they were, if you were going to get a giant pet snake, this is not a bad on the pet aspect of it, personality-wise. Like, there are insanely better choices of species, but there was a reason why they were able to maintain popularity for a little while without like killing every single person who tried to own one.
Yeah, not every single one. Ew.
I had it coming.
Still on the large side.
So she is locked onto you. So see when I move her, her gaze is keeping stable.
Okay, here, I'll trade with you.
Oh no, it's fine.
She's perfect. I love her.
Exhibit building.
Right here, Cindy,
Yeah.
right here.
Snake is incredibly.
Look on the cork, see?
So those are ringed pythons. So they are another Indonesian highly cannibalistic species.
Look at that black head, Byron.
But I
Look
mean,
at
like, man,
It's almost blue.
it's incredible.
that. Yeah.
It's really fun.
Now imagine that as a young one being orange.
Yeah.
I mean, like Halloween decoration
Like the most
orange.
and this is all a scam anyway. So these come into the country and they're labeled as Volta ball pythons. They're sold for $1,000 each, even though they're the same normal ball python as anything else. They've just lived way longer. And so in this same locality, I have 2 other ball pythons that are just your most normal colored ball python. Like, they're just normal ball pythons. If you look at this female, the size of her head, the amount of scars, like, this is a female that has lived a very, very long life without being moved from her location.
Okay, see that? Look at that scar over
Yeah.
there. Right
Just
here.
just
She's
all,
been bit.
yeah. Like, she's lived a
You
life.
said volatile or volta?
Volta.
That's
Well,
what,
okay,
the,
so-
the geographic region?
No, this is where the scam is, because 80% of the ball pythons that come into the pet trade come out of the Volta region. They come out, like, it's a scam. They found a really big female that has survived collection up until this point, because it's in some remote village, in this case.
You're talking about Togo, Benin, and
Yeah.
Ghana?
Yeah. And then they give them a name and charge 3 times more for them, but they're just a big ball python, and if you took any ball python and let it live in the wild for 50 years without anyone messing with it, it would look like this. All of my big snakes have tiny heads. I'm trying to figure out a way to get them to have bigger heads. I think I know what the problem is, but it's an epigenetic thing. I can raise any
Look at the size
python.
of the head on this girl right here.
So he just took his first, like, 8-pound pig, and that's why his head has gone from this big to, like, that big. It literally stretches them out and then they fill it in with muscle. Put these animals around to make managing them safer and also just give them more enrichment. So, like, I'm not allowed to have males and females share the same cage anymore, but I can still have them experience the scent of each other, you know?
Just teasing.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Do they get rowdy because of that?
Okay, so yes, male reticulated pythons are probably one of the most dangerous snakes in modern herpetoculture because they get crazy hormonal in the winter. Even when you don't tease them like that, they get really dangerous. And if you have a scent of another male on you, like, they will rip you open.
Is there any nice blood?
I mean, all of these are nice in the right way. And so, like, it's a matter of understanding their psychology. And so, like, if I want to piss this animal off, I would try and pick it up from this direction. If I want it to be okay, I'm going to pick it up from this direction. And so from here, I'm going to bump it away, and it's going to be mad. Versus here, I'm going to scoop it, and it's going to kind of roll into my hand. And so, once it's scooped into my hand, and it's off balance like this,
It's more okay.
it's more okay.
Also, Barclays is hot.
Oh, thanks. So, just doing this about once a week and the animal will be pretty okay. So, if you don't approach it from the front, it's probably not going to spray. But if I want to get bit, all I have to do is poke it from the front, and that's a big warm thing going straight out of space, and it's like, why are you doing this to me? I don't trust you, what's going on? Rodents, tortoises, and parrots. Production building, so I have colonies of rats on this side and mice on this side. But yeah, I've gone so far as to catch wild mice and breed them into my strains to make them more resistant to breed in the heat. It's pretty hard to breed mice in Florida. They really like it a little on the cooler side. At least if you want good production. So there used to be a bunch of different, much like the Galapagos tortoises, where every island kind of has its own semi-unique tortoise subspecies. There used to be a bunch of subspecies of these guys. They when you get secondhand birds, like.
Oh, I know.
Commercial species building.
Now that one looks like it would come in. Like the mocha one. Just think it. Like this would be the stuff that you know.
Okay, so you guys are gonna get to pretend to be snake breeders for a minute. So this is a blood python with a couple of different mutations. So it has one that's called batik, and that gives it this very pixely, busy pattern. It has another that's called matrix that gives it all of this yellow in the back, so normally they wouldn't have quite this much yellow. And then it has a trait that gives it a little bit extra red as well. But basically this is what's called a batrix. And this is a striped gene that is called slackline. And so I want you to imagine in your head mushing these two animals together. What do you think breeding them will look like? Kind of form that mental image in your head. So this is the two stacked together. And so that just kind of gives you a gist of functionally what a lot of captive breeding is. It's, you know, having an idea of different phenotypes and seeing which ones are going to be compatible into an aesthetically pleasing snake and which ones just don't really mesh. This is a specific locality that is also an incomplete dominant mutation that gives them this higher orange color. And so trying to breed more of these, make them available as captive bred animals. This one has these patches of white on it that I suspect will be genetic that I'm trying to prove out. Pick them up, I clean their poo. I don't set them down in the bright lights and now I'm like warm and over them and now I'm far away and now I'm warm and over them and now I'm far away, and you can see this animal's just getting upset by me acting in a way I don't normally act. So this is just to show that there's a ton of different looks and phenotypes and stuff for this species, and really why it's one of my favorites, because, you know, personality wise they really do tame out into great snakes, and color wise there's just a lot to work with. So this is definitely an intermediate snake, but usually the customers who are drawn to a snake like this, it's not their first snake. I don't have to hold their hand in the same way, so I like them as my customer. You can see that when they stiff out their body like that, it's when they're stressed and they're about to like kind of explode out. But if I work with them, so I'm on the inside of their coil and it's much easier to scoop them that way, versus on the outside I'm like pushing them away from me. But if I let them scoop themselves onto my hand, and if I lift them up and they don't have that same, like, a lot of their leverage comes from the mass of the feces that they have in their back. And so when they're up off the ground, they just don't have that same leverage, and so they're easier to work with. One of my biggest breeder blood pythons, and so this is really as big as they get. And so for all intents and purposes, like, this feels like a big snake, but like when you put a measuring tape on it, it's not really much bigger than my biggest ball python. So it's all the fun of a big snake, but like this will never hurt anyone. This is never gonna get out and like cause a problem in the environment.
So do they not get depressed?
That is a good question and a complex question. So this species that I work with are very sedentary, and even still, I don't like these cages. I want them to be bigger. I have been working a lot with stimulating them within the cages, and so a lot of times you'll see logs in there, you'll see, I just broke down the bigger rack setup where I had a bunch of that stuff, but basically, if you give them the enrichment, they will use it. But the other thing about snakes is that so when I feed them a meal, their organs double in size. And so I think what we're seeing here is the same thing occurring for the neurons. I think if I give them a blank, stimulating environment, they're kind of too stupid to know what they're missing. And that feels really harsh, but like, I can show you captive colonies of thousands of snakes in the most barren setups possible, and I cannot find any biological metric that would hint that those animals are missing something. But that's not enough for me either. And so that's sort of why I built this facility, is this is the traditional way. And I think it could be improved upon. But in order for me to say this could be improved upon, I also need to say I've been doing it this way, the same way as you have, and this is why I think doing it some other way is better. And so to answer your question, do I think they are depressed in these cages? No. Do I think you get a happier animal in a better cage? Yes. And so that's a complicated answer, and I don't know that everyone is going to receive that. They are genuinely curious about what's going on. And like, it's hard not to put emotion onto that, but it also is not nothing. So, I don't know. I'm trying to make up my own mind about how deep I think a lot of these animals go, and so I don't know that I have 100% of the answers, but I enjoy the animals more when I give them more space, and I'm trying to message that in a way that people can receive, that it's not you are abusing animals and doing things horribly wrong and you need to change everything you're doing.
Are these morphs, like the skin morphs or scale morphs, ever coupled to other like behavioral traits?
Oh yeah. Yes, they are. Yeah, very infrequently for this species, but we have a few. So
So kind of like how like spider, I think spider ball pythons.
I know
like,
they
the
have
big
neurological
wobbles.
disorders, but
Maybe I don't know about these ones.
Spider was exactly the one that I was thinking. And so a lot of times those are neural crest mutations.
Yeah.
And like you have two different types of mutations to put them in very broad categories. There's like the can't make something or making too much of something, and then there's like the pigment distribution mutations. And a lot of times when you change where the pigment is distributed, you change where other stuff goes along with it. And so color mutations, oftentimes, very seldomly have problems, or if they do, it's like an inbreeding depression type thing. Whereas like pattern mutations that physically are just changing elements of the pattern, a lot of times they can have secondary issues.
like jungle or motley and those other weird things that show up.
Bumblebee.
Those are usually pretty clear, but like the homozygous of motley and boa is a fatal snake. And so like there's plenty of stuff where it's like the single gene is fine, but the homozygous form a lot of times is a problem. But then you have stuff like spider where it's like part of the mutation is a misshapen inner ear bone, and so that animal will always have some form of mild neurological something.
So the columella is messed up? The stabies?
I believe so. I think that was what they finally made the differentiation on in terms of like what the actual problem was for the animal. Because, you know, I always heard that it was, you know, it was a neurological issue, but it is, but that neurological issue has a physical component, I think.
It's always anatomy. It's always anatomy.
The respiratory infection thing is
Emma, do you want to take a pose for
You can get a really bad strain that will wipe out a colony. But you can also just get an animal that is stressed and its background microbiome, which includes these viruses.
I'll send my cat on.
So there's not really a good answer.
Do you like do PCR afterwards?
Yeah,
No discretion.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've made, so we have a diagnostic PCR, which is like a standard RT-PCR, and I actually made a custom qPCR for their virus too, because I know on our gross presence absence test, they test as negative.
Okay.
So I don't know though if I've really gotten rid of virus or if I've just gotten them virus at such a low titer that it'll test negative on a test. Does that matter? I don't know, but I'm going to make a more sensitive test with the qPCR, and really, I want a beautiful graph that's showing that virus going down versus present, not present.
I get what you're saying.
Across Europe, across the US, all the prevalence studies are finding in about 30% of adult pythons. I found that in the Everglades. And so like, it's part of the microbiome. It doesn't cause problems unless it does. And it's that unless it does that I am trying to kind of suss out here.
Is the mortality, I know it happened to you, but is the mortality rate like typically high, like in the wild, like the 30% that you found?
No. I mean, like, again, it's like, it's a testing problem. Like, when you have a disease, when you have a really pathogenic strain explode through a colony, it gets very high mortality, and people look into it. You don't look into your healthy colony that has the same viral prevalence.
Yeah,
and so, like, if I have a snake in here that gets stressed and develops clinical signs, in my mind, that animal is immediately removed from the colony because it gets turned into a virus mutation factory. And so I'm not worried about the strains that are in here right now, but I am worried about the strains that come out of an immunocompromised animal that is stressed and showing clinical signs. Even if
transmission then?
probably oral, yeah. Like, we know it increases in prevalence during breeding season when it gets cold, and so the animals get cold, they get a little bit more stressed, they are put with other animals, which is stress. And so you stack enough stressors, and a background virus breaks into something. And maybe that's because it also has a secondary bacteria, we don't really know. But no matter the case, at that point, the amount of viral replication going on in that animal is orders of magnitude higher. And these viruses are not great at replicating their genomes, and so now you turn into a virus mutation factory. How I have shifted managing is to gross disease.
Okay.
Because I can walk into any population of pythons in the US, no matter how healthy, and if you have not done what I've done for that first building, I can almost guarantee you I can guess the prevalence of your virus.
Oh, so this is like similar, like feline, like herpes or like bovine herpes, where like it can like they're kind of like a lot of them like have it and they continue reproducing, but they'll have flare-ups like when they get like stressed. And you'll have like that sneezing chronic cat.
And it's an extremely difficult conversation to have with people, especially for this species, because people put a lot of money into this species that had no clinical issues, never had any history of clinical issues,
Because the test said so.
but because the test said so.
Ouch.
Yeah. And so, but like, I don't want to like tell people that these viruses don't matter. I killed $250,000 worth of snakes with these viruses, and so you can lose colonies to them if you do stuff wrong. What is wrong? How do you figure that out? Well, that's my most extreme scenario of how much money can you invest in testing and quarantine and biosecurity. This is my model of what, if you walk into any other python colony in the US right now, this is the model that they're going to be using. And will I see a disease pop up in here? My bet is no, if I am not stupid about things. And for me, it's the investment is a good quarantine coming in and making sure that this is just the latest newly known unknown. This animal has God knows how many pathogens that I will never know to look for until I have a reason to look for it.
Yeah.
And so it almost doesn't matter what it is. Like, the more I'm learning about this specific thing, the more backup in general I become, where it's like, just put things through a really long quarantine, and if it's not going to show disease in the conditions you give it, it probably won't spread disease.
See, you're more vetty than you thought.
Yep.
That sounds like exactly what.
It's a very nice quarantine length as well.
Yeah, for sure. Like, again, it's like, and that's cheap. Like, that doesn't, you're not talking thousands of dollars in testing and stuff. Like, I know how much it costs to correct a spill when there is one.
A lot.
It's really hard, because how do you say that, like, these viruses don't matter unless they do, and testing is important, but also kind of not? We don't know, and unfortunately a lot of animals are getting killed in the ignorance.
Yeah.
And even more so, a lot of reputations. Because all I need is, like, to sell a positive snake.
And it wipes out the other person's colony.
Well, not even that. Like, it'll kill out your reputation. Like it just. I can send you a snake, and you can test it 2 weeks later, and you might have infected it in your own colony, and you're gonna go online and say, I got a positive snake from this person, and like,
That's it.
that's it. I'm cutting this as a 2-part episode because it took a crap ton of work. Did you know that liking and subscribing is the only scientifically proven way to get better odds on your next clutch? Yep, don't fact check that. Thank you for watching. Take care.